Okay, we were talking about BaOmer yesterday, and I had mentioned there are two aspects to BaOmer, and yesterday we spoke about one of them, the first aspect, and that is the connection between BaOmer and Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. But there is another aspect of BaOmer, and that is we spoke last week about the fact, about the very moving and powerful story of Rabbi Akiva, and the fact that 24,000 of his students, after 24 years of learning and struggling, and his wife living in poverty, he finally becomes the greatest of the rabbis of Israel, and he has 24,000 Talmidim, and such a wonderful thing. And yet, the 24,000 students died in a period of time between Pesach and Shavuos. We talked about this last week. I don't want to repeat the whole story. It was my speculation. We know Rabbi Akiva's wife died shortly thereafter. It's my speculation, I have no source for it, that it was the heartbreak of, she finally saw a reason for all that she went through and all of it collapsed. And that's enough to kill you. Rabbi Akiva, on the other hand, started from scratch. Think about that as well. He lost 24,000 Talmidim. He started again. He started with 5. And, he could have had the attitude, what's the use of 5 students? And yet those 5 students, among whom are Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, are the foundation of the Mishnah and the Torah Shebaal Peh. So one of the lessons of Rabbi Akiva is you don't give up. That even if everything you worked for collapsed, gets destroyed, you don't simply throw in the towel. You keep on going on. Rav Soloveitchik, remember Rav Yisrael Soloveitchik of Yeshiva University, I remember in the, I don't remember the exact year, but I think it was either the late 60s or the very early 70s, suffered 3 bereavements in 1 year, in a very, very short span of time. He lost a brother, he lost his mother, and then he lost his wife. So he sat Shiva, like one after the other. And people who knew him, I did not know him well, say he never really recovered, although he taught Torah for another 10 years, but he never really recovered from the devastating nature of that tragedy. But at the end of the 3rd Shiva, that was the Shiva for his wife, he said a thought that I always remember. Chazal tell us that Hashem created many, many worlds before this world. This is not the first world. He created many worlds before this world. In fact, the Tiferes Yisrael, the great commentary on the Mishnah, actually says that that might be the understanding of dinosaurs and fossils, because when you say God created many worlds, it doesn't have to be other planets. It could be on Earth. There was an Earth that underwent ice ages and meteorite showers. And all of that is pre the world that's described in Bereshis. You see, we're not manipulating the 6 days of creation. That's a different thing. Some people want to say, well, each day of creation might be 1 billion years. No. The 6 days are 6 days. But the age of the earth could be connected to the prior worlds that are pre-Bereshis. This is the Tiferes Yisrael. So Chazal's Lashon is, Borei Eilamais Umachrivan. He created many worlds that he destroyed. And Rav Soloveitchik just raised the question, now why did God create so many worlds that were destroyed? What's the point? So his answer was that Hashem wants to give us a lesson, that even if all the worlds you create get destroyed, you have to go on and create again. Hashem is teaching us the idea that just because your world is destroyed doesn't mean you don't go on. And that in many, many ways is the whole story of Jewish history. What did we do after the Churban Beis HaMikdash? What did we do after the Holocaust? We keep on going. You keep on going. Because that was the midah of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Rabbi Akiva kept on going. He lost 24,000 Talmidim. He said, I'll start with 5. 5? Like, what's the use of that? Well, what are you doing? 5? And yet, they are the Tanoim, Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Yehuda. These are the foundations of Torah Shebaal Peh, came from those 5. It's an amazing thing. Because they had many Talmidim, etc. And in fact, most of the Tanoim are from that group. They come from that group of 5 that are the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva in the second round. Now, there is a tradition, though, and again, I don't have to get into the machlokas. Did they die through a plague? Did they die through bar kochba? Okay, we discussed that as well, and I'll get in trouble for that, but so I don't want to have to repeat it necessarily. But be it as it may, there is a tradition that on the 33rd day of the Omer, they stop dying. On the 33rd day of the Omer, the plague stopped. There's a machlokas. Do we mean it stopped and it didn't start again? And that's the minhag that says the Avela stops after Lag BaOmer? Or was it a hiatus? It started again, but Lag BaOmer was a day off. And therefore the simcha of Lag BaOmer is it was the day that the plague or the deaths ceased. They stopped. So that's the second aspect of Lag BaOmer. In other words, Lag BaOmer has a simcha for 2 reasons. One is connected to Rav Shimon bar Yochai that we talked about yesterday. The other is connected to the cessation in the deaths of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. Yeah.
Did it stop, or did all of them just die?
Yeah. So obviously that's a very good question. If Rabbi Akiva had 24,000 students, and they all died, then the reason it stopped on Lag BaOmer is because nobody's left. Right? That's a very good question. So what exactly would be the simcha? So apparently, I don't have the exact numbers, apparently 24,000 must be a round number, meaning to say there were those who did survive, meaning theoretically they could have died. Lag BaOmer, they got spared. There was, it's actually similar, it's not the same sugya, but to what Shita of Taisus and Maseches Tainis, that the last Tisha B'Av of the desert, when the generation of the desert is supposed to die, the last 15,000 didn't die. So, meaning the last group who were supposed to die, the 40th year of the desert, actually didn't die. So even though the Torah says the whole Torah died, but that could leave over a certain remainder. Now the question becomes, why would Lag BaOmer be a special day? Why would Lag BaOmer be a hiatus? Why would the 33rd day of the Omer, which otherwise has no particular chashivas, why would that be the day that the students of Rabbi Akiva stopped dying? So this teaches us a very, very deep idea of Lag BaOmer, because let's remember what the Gemara in Yevamos says. The Gemara in Yevamos says that the students of Rabbi Akiva died because they did not show proper kavod, respect, honor to each other. Now let's ask ourselves, what does it mean they did not show proper kavod to each other? Let's imagine we would have had a video from that time. Are we assuming they pushed each other out of line? They called each other names? You're an idiot, you're stupid, get out of here, you're worthless. We can assume that if you're zocha to be a Talmud of Rabbi Akiva, especially Rabbi Akiva who taught, as we learned a few weeks ago, v'yahavta l'orecha kamocha, right? Loving your friend as you love yourself is a klal gadol in the Torah. We would assume his students followed halacha very, very well. If you would have seen them, you would have said, oh, Baruch Hashem, true b'nei Torah. So what does it mean they did not show proper kavod to each other? So there's a very interesting observation from Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, who says that the shorish, the root of the concept of kavod, comes from the word kaved. Kaved means heaviness. Kavod is not a matter of etiquette. It's not a matter of politeness. It's not a matter of derech eretz. You know, I could be polite to you. I could be, even nice to you. But I look at your person as my inferior. It's not really worth very much. But I'll be nice to him because I'm a tzaddik. Noblesse oblige, if that's how you pronounce it. Kavod is very different. Kavod is, I look at you and I see you as weighty, heavy. Not in terms of physical weight. Heavy, significant. Having, to use the Latin word, gravitas. Heft. Right? Even in colloquial English. When somebody is a real big expert in a field, we might say he's a heavyweight in his field. So kavod is not a matter of being polite. Kavod is a matter of looking at a person and seeing them as worthy, seeing them as people of substance who have something to give. It's a certain attitude towards seeing the godliness in the other person. And on that, again, for reasons that are still a bit mysterious, the students of Rabbi Akiva were felt by God to be lacking a little bit. Maybe, again, we could just guess about this, they had such a great teacher that they didn't really consider what they could learn from their colleagues. And who needs you? I'm connected to the big guy, right? So whatever it is, there was a sense that I don't need you. You don't really contribute anything to me. We're all connected to Rabbi Akiva and the like. Now you may ask, so this is very subtle, meaning to say, if you would have seen their behavior behaviorally, perhaps they acted perfectly. But in their heart, there was not a sense of seeing the chashivos in the other person. Now you may ask, well, do you get the death penalty for that? Do you get killed for that? You die for that? So one way of looking at it is, it's not that, God is punishing them. But it works this way. These 24,000 people were supposed to be the Torah leaders. They were supposed to be the Gedolim of the next generation. They would be the ones that would teach Klal Yisrael Torah. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu basically said, you can't be a leader and a transmitter of Torah unless you could look at your other Jews and see their chashivas, see their goodness. So it's not, it's not like a punishment. It's not like, oh, I did a sin, so God punishes me. It's simply they couldn't be the ones who would be the transmitters of Torah. Lo nagu kavod zelazeh. And that actually explains why we do mourn. Remember, I mentioned that the minhagim of Avelis during Sefirah are not from the law of the Gemara. The Gemara gives us the story, but the Gemara does not say there's any chiyuvim of Avelis. They are minhagim that developed in the time of the Gaonim. And I should add a little thing, that among Ashkenazim, the minhagim got much more strict in the time of the Crusades because many Jewish communities were wiped out during Iyar and Sivan. So in truth, it's not just Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, at least among Ashkenazim, it is very much connected also to the Crusades. But be it as it may, people ask the question, okay, the students of Rabbi Akiva, that's pretty bad. But to be brutally frank, we've had worse. 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust. In the Crusades, there were many more as well. Why are we still fixated on Talmidei Rabbi Akiva? Like, why? Why am I still, every single year, for a long period of time, I got to think about the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva? Like, why? The answer is, it's not so much on mourning their deaths. Because if the only issue would be mourning their deaths, as I say, unfortunately, we have more deaths that we could be mourning. But it's to remember why they died, spiritually. I don't mean politically. Why they died, and therefore resolve in our own lives to rectify that idea. And that is why it is not a contradiction to the fact, right? The Ikar Avodah of Sefirah is to prepare ourselves to receive the Torah. And the second aspect of Sefirah is to mourn the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. So you might think these are two different opposite things. No, it's all the same. Because one of the ways we prepare ourselves to receive the Torah is by connecting to each other and by seeing kavod, seeing the other person with kavod. And that's not just, I'm nice to you because I'm a tzaddik. But rather, I see your chashivas. I see your greatness, your goodness. I see your heft. I see your gravitas. I see the significance in who you are. So that's not like a separate thing. That is one of the ways you prepare for Kabbalah Satira. So this is the general perspective on the chait of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva. So what about Lag BaOmer? So Baruch Hashem, this gives me an excuse to segue back to Tomer Devorah, which I have not yet abandoned. But Baruch Hashem, this is maybe a good transition to the conclusion of it. And that is, you'll recall, as we did Tomer Devorah, and I always like to tell people that I make no claim to have the best Tomer Devorah share on the internet, but I do believe I can claim I have the longest running share on Tomer Devorah on the internet. I think we've done more than 70 sessions. So that much I think I can claim legitimately. But you'll recall that so much of the Tomer Devorah is about the Sefiros, right? The different ways that God relates to the world. And as you know, the 10 Sefiros are divided into the first group of 3, which is God's mental operations, Keser, Crown, Chachma, Bina. But the lower 7 are the emotional, behavioral attributes. Again, I'm not going to go into that now by Arichas, but just to remind you of the lower 7, it's Chesed, loving kindness, Gevura, inner strength, Tiferes, beauty, Netzach, eternity or victory, Hod is glory, Yesod is foundation, Malchus is kingship. Right? These are the lower 7 Sefiros. These lower 7 are extremely important in many, many aspects. But as you know, each of the lower 7 Sefiros is linked to a particular personality who exemplifies that Midah of Hashem. So the Midah of Chesed is exemplified by Avraham. The Midah of inner strength is Yitzchak. Tiferes, which is the synthesis of Chesed and Gevura, is Yaakov Avinu. Netzach, eternity or endurance, is Moshe Rabbeinu. Hod, glory, is Aaron. Yesod is Yosef. Malchus is David. You'll notice in this Kabbalistic designation, Moshe and Aaron precede Yosef, right? Moshe is Netzach, Aaron is Hod, Yosef is Yesod. Even though Yosef lived earlier, but mystically, so to speak, what Yosef represents comes after Moshe and Aaron. Now, this notion of 7 repeats itself in many, many contexts. It is the basis of the Ushpizin of Sukkot, which actually explains why the primary, although there is another opinion, but the primary shita of Ushpizin is that the 4th day of Sukkot is Moshe, the 5th day is Aaron, the 6th day is Yosef. People are always asking, why is it out of order? But the answer is very simple. Obviously, Ushpizin is a mystical concept, and it's based on the Zohar, and it's based on the Sefiros. So, the 7 lower Sefiros are also connected to the 7 weeks of the Omer. Each week of the Omer is connecting to the spiritual energy of that designated Sefirah. So the first week of the Omer, which of course is the week of Pesach, is the week of Chesed, which is Avraham. The second week is the week of Yitzchak, which is Gevura. Right? And again, one could spend many, many hours, and we spend some time on it, but whatever time we spent on it, you could double, triple, quadruple, and more, as to what exactly is the nature of the spiritual energy of each of these Sefiros. But you understand that just like each of the Ushpizin is Keneged one of these Sefiros, each week of Sefirah is Keneged. But what gets a little more complicated is that since there are 7 days in a week, so every single day represents a Sefirah as well within the larger Sefirah. So for example, in the week of Chesed, there is a Chesed, a Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus. And you can even see this in the CEDAR, even in the ArtScroll CEDAR, at least in small letters. The designation, Kabbalistically, of the first day of the Omer, which of course is the second day of Pesach, is Chesed shebechesed. It is the day of loving kindness within the week of loving kindness. Because it's the first day of the first week. The second day of Sefirot, which is the third day of Pesach, is called Gevurah Shebechesed, the inner strength within Chesed. And do not confuse the second day of the first week with the first day of the second week. The first day of the second week would be called Chesed of Gevurah. The second day of the first week is called Gevurah of Chesed. What on earth is the difference here, right? Everything could be inverted in the next week. So once again, all I can tell you is there actually are svarim and books in English as well, which try to identify how the energies combine and try to give each of us a spiritual meditation or exercise for every day of the Omer. That what is the focus of the Gevurah within Chesed, as opposed to the Chesed within the Gevurah, and how you combine all of these different things. So it's actually quite it's a deep idea, but it's quite a popular theme. There's actually more than one book out there that tries to address this as a character-building exercise. And that, of course, is absolutely in the spirit, although the Ramak himself does not go through the days of Sefirot and Omer, but it's certainly in the spirit of the Tomer Devorah, in which we utilize the Sefiros as a basis for building our midos and our character and our relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Yeah.
I mean, but is it kind of like in the Tao that they have the dark and the white, and vice versa? They have the white and the dark. It's like it's the piece of the thing within the other thing.
Yes. And in fact, the truth of the matter is, in the world of the Arizal, even the Ramak's Kabbalah, these go on with infinity, meaning to say it's like what do they call those little dolls inside? It's a Russian thing, the doll within the doll within the doll. I mean, at some point they're going to stop. They can't go on infinitely. But it's like every single sphera has all the other spheres in it, and all of those sub-spheres have all of the spheres in it. And it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on, and it goes on. So there's the chesed of the gevurah, of the, whatever it would be. It can go to an infinite number of levels. That's the fundamental, even subatomic structure of the spiritual universe. Okay, so now, here's a fascinating thing. Let's ask ourselves, what combination of the Sefiros is the 33rd day of the Omer? Lag BaOmer, Motzei Shabbos, and Sunday. So Lag BaOmer is actually the 5th day of the 5th week. Now, don't be confused here. We're going to count it. It is 4 weeks and 5 days in the Omer. But keep in mind, when you say 4 weeks and 5 days, that means the 5 days are in the 5th week. Because it'll only be after the 5 weeks, I say, right? So 4 weeks and 5 days, which equals 33, is the 5th day of the 5th week. Be sure you understand that, even though you say 4 weeks, because you've completed 4 weeks. Now, what is that? The 5th Sefira is Hod. Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod. Aaron. So it's a double dose of Aaron. It is the day of Aaron, and it is the week of Aaron. Glory of glory, Aaron squared. Why is that significant? Because we know that Aaron's outstanding midah was Ohev Shalom B'Reidev Shalom, the pursuer of peace, the lover of peace, even greater than Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, his job in life was sometimes, he was the most humble of all people, of course. But his job sometimes was to be tough. That was his job. He had to be. That's the task that God gave him. Aaron was the one that people went to when they felt heartbroken, they felt despondent, when there was not shalom between husband and wife or parent and children. And Aaron would bring reconciliation. Aaron would bring peace. And that's why it actually mentions that when Aaron died, the Avelos in Klal Yisrael was even greater than when Moshe died. Because what can we say, Moshe? Moshe was Moshe, the greatest of the greatest of the greatest. But the average person didn't necessarily chap a shmooze with Moshe. In fact, you can ask how many Jews ever even met Moshe Rabbeinu? They heard him speak, he gave the Torah. But, did you say Good Shabbos to Moshe Rabbeinu? Did you say Shalom Aleichem to Moshe Rabbeinu? Remember, he was kind of a scary figure. He had this veil over his head, like very mysterious person. He was more angel than human in many, many ways. Aaron, and again, forgive me for humanizing it too much, but Aaron was a man of the people. So people related to Aaron in ways that they couldn't relate to Moshe because of his supernatural greatness. So above all, Aaron represents Hod because glory here refers to the capacity to see the glory in others. This was Aaron's greatness. Aaron stepped back to let others shine. So it turns out, Lag BaOmer, the world is suffused. The spiritual energy in the world is the midah of Aaron. So now you can understand why the students of Rabbi Akiva did not die on the day of Lag BaOmer. If the reason they died is because they did not see the chashivos, the kavod, the weightiness in the other person, on Lag BaOmer, at least temporarily, the scales were lifted from their eyes. They saw people in a different light. They saw the true essence. They saw the chashivas of the other. And in the moment they attained that level, even if it was only temporary, because it may have started afterwards, the magefa stopped immediately. Because if the magefa came because they did not show kavod, zelazah, the magefa stopped when they reached the level of Aaron, Hod, Shebahod. That's the significance of Lag BaOmer, which means Lag BaOmer, there's a special capacity that we can have to connect to other people, to see the good in other people, to see the chashivas in other people. We can maybe get to a certain level in that avodah that maybe the rest of the year might be a little more difficult for us, so to speak. Our eyes can be opened to things that we sometimes don't see or we don't pay attention to. Right? So this is the second aspect of Lag BaOmer, the idea of Hod Shebahod. Yeah.
Wasn't the whole thing about Sefiros like only after Sefirot and Omer? Like, or is that an all year round thing? Like, why is it that? I'm not sure I understand. Like, we count, and then each day of the counting, there's like a Sefirot for the week and a Sefirot for the day, but that we only look at that after the fact. No? Or is that
the interpretation was given after the fact, but keep in mind, when you give that interpretation, you're basically saying that was the kavana in the mitzvah itself. In other words, Sefiros are not an invention; they are an interpretation of what spiritual reality is. Right? We can't create Sefiros. We can only discover and identify them. So they are pre-existing entities. They are the mechanism by which Hashem created the world.
And that's an all year round thing, or only during Sefirah?
No, all year round. Sure. But Sefirah is a mitzvah that symbolizes that. But Sefiros are all year round, of course.
Sefirot and Omer, still on this day of the month, or this day of the year, it was Hod from
Hod
Hod.
Shebahod, yeah.
Does that mean that during any normal week you could also count through the different spirits, each day representing a different spirit?
Well, yeah, but I think that may be true, but I think you're going to have a little bit of a difficulty. How do you identify the week? Meaning to say, take a random week of the year. So I might say Sunday is Chesed and Monday is Gevura. But what does the week represent? It depends where you start. Is it a Chesed week? Is it a Gevura week? I mean, where do you start? Do you start from Rosh Hashanah? Do you start from Pesach? You know, it's not clear. I mean, that's going to be your problem, meaning we don't necessarily have a clear Masorah as to how to define any overall week outside of the Omer weeks. Yeah.
So what gave us the ability to define it during this period of Sefirah?
Well, because, I mean, it's working backwards a little bit. I mean, since the Torah gives us a commandment to count 7 weeks. So in that commandment, there is a week 1, a week 2, a week 3. So the Kabbalists see that as logically correlating to the order of the Sefiros. But that's because you have a designated week 1. The rest of the year, we don't necessarily have a number we can assign to a week, even though you're correct with the days, that is the case. Okay, so this is a deeper meaning of Lag BaOmer. So now I just want to conclude with the following idea. So it turns out, if you look at the 2 simchas of Lag BaOmer, one is a celebration of the greatness of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai that we talked about yesterday. And the other is the rectification of the sin of the Talmidei Rabbi Akiva that we talked about today based on Hod Shebahod. What is interesting is that these 2 ideas are in a little bit of contradiction to each other. Because Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai represents what you might call passion, zealousness, total commitment, fire. Remember that when he left the cave the first time, and he saw this farmer working and being osek in Parnasa, he looked at him and the guy burnt up. And Rav Shimon Bar Yochai said, how can a person waste his life with ephemeral, temporary, trivial things and not be devoted to Torah? So when I think about Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, right, we're thinking about learning no matter what, mitzvahs no matter what. Now here's the problem. In the world that we live in, we often see that the more passionate and fiery and committed I get in my mission, the less accepting and loving I am for people who I feel are not living up to the standard. You go to college, go to work, but I mean, I'm talking even if they're religious, and Kal v'chomer if they're not religious. So it tends to be passion and zealousness tends to breed a certain denigration of others. But then you have the opposite. There are people who are loving and open and tolerant and accepting, but they don't stand for that much. Sure, you want gay marriage. What's wrong with gay marriage? 2 people love each other. Who am I to interfere with that? Abortion on demand. Oh, it's a woman's body. How dare we interfere with reproductive choice? Now, the point I'm making is we tend to have this dichotomy in life between the passionate, true believers who may tend to be fanatically intolerant and sometimes even hateful, although that's a very strong word, versus the big, tense, open, tolerant people who don't seem to have a moral compass and a firm sense of what the values of life are about. Either or. And yet, what Sefirot and Omer, what Lag BaOmer is telling us is, this is not a binary choice. You're not one or the other. You got to be both. You got to connect to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Be passionate, be fiery. Don't waste your time on things that are temporary, ephemeral, trivial. Focus on what's important. But at the same time, remember to look at others and see their kavod, see their weight, see their worth, see their legitimacy. Don't allow your passion to make you intolerant, and don't allow your tolerance to take away your passion. You have to be both. Now, the truth of the matter is, this whole shir is really a commentary on a pasuk. It's a pasuk in Zechariah. Now, Zechariah was one of the last Nevi'im at the time of the second Beis HaMikdash, beginning of the second Beis HaMikdash. And Zechariah said, Ha'emes v'hashalom ehavu. You shall love truth and you shall love peace. The Kotzker Rebbe was said to have remarked, it's easy to love truth if you don't care about peace. And it's easy to love peace if you don't care about truth. If I don't care about truth, I can get along with everybody. I just don't care. The other way around, if I really care about truth, I can't get along with anybody because I think everybody's off in some way. Because only I have truth, of course. Right? So what does the Navi say? Sorry, you don't love truth and not peace, or love peace and not truth. You got to love truth and you got to love peace. And that, I would suggest, are the two themes of Lag BaOmer. Now let me just then total switch. Today is another very, very, very important day, not connected to Sefira. This is the day of Pesach Sheni, right? Today is the right, you didn't say Tachanan this morning. Pesach Sheni, the story of the second Pesach. So I just want to tell you a very, very short vort, but what you think about Pesach Sheni. These people were tamei. They couldn't bring the Korban Pesach. They were ritually impure. They went to Moshe Rabbeinu and they said, Lama nigara, why should we lose our chance to bring the Korban Pesach? And Moshe didn't know the halacha. Moshe went to God and says, what happens? And God said, if they're tamei, or if they're, once we get to Eretz Yisrael, if they're far away from Yerushalayim, they're given a chance to bring the Korban Pesach 1 month later on the 14th of Iyar. This is the makeup for those. Now, of course, if you're tamei even today, you're in trouble, but there's no third makeup. But if you were tamei a month ago, you had a second chance. So there are two lessons in Pesach Sheni, the Chiddushei HaRim says, that we ought to contemplate. Sometimes a person feels they are so tamei, they are so impure, they cannot connect to God. Or derech rechoka, they're so far away, they can't connect to God. The Torah teaches, no matter how tamei you think you are, no matter how far you think you are, derech rechoka, Hashem will give you a second chance. You want to come near to Him, He'll give you that chance. That's point number one. It is the gift of a second chance. There's never a point of no return. There's never a point where you're so tamei or you're so derech rechoka that you're beyond hope. That's point one. Yeah.
What happens if someone is chayav kares?
Chayav kares? You talking about generally chayav kares?
Like they still return. If they've like received kares, could they still return?
Well, you can do tshuva on kares. Yeah, you can do tshuva on the kares goes away. You do tshuva on kares. Even the kares goes away. Now, the Chiddushei HaRim says there's another point though. Keep in mind that Pesach Sheni came only because people asked for it. Now, there was no reason for them to ask. I mean, if the halacha as it was known at that point was, if you're tamei, you don't bring a korban. I mean, it's like asking, can I get an exception to drive on Shabbos? I mean, the halacha had been a tamei person doesn't bring a korban Pesach. So you go to Moshe and you say, talk to God about changing this. I mean, what's going on? What is even in their minds to say, hey, we couldn't bring a korban Pesach? What do we, what's the Havamina? The answer is that they loved Hashem so much. They had such a desire to serve Hashem. They could not bear the idea of being excluded. So in truth, even asking the question made no sense at all. It made no sense to ask the question. Because if the halacha was, you don't bring it, you don't bring it. But they wanted to have a chance. Now, what would have been if they just would have said, like a good Jew would say, oh, the halacha is the halacha. I'm putter. Maybe it's even an advantage. Imagine if we got a patur, you don't have to clean up for Pesach this year. Are we going to complain? Oh, why am I deprived of the chance, to clean my kitchen for Pesach? Assuming we got an officially signed and authenticated permission from Hashem, I'm not sure we would complain that much. But the answer is, they needed to serve Hashem. So here's what the Rim says. If they wouldn't have asked, they wouldn't have got it. This is quite amazing. There would not have been Pesach Sheni had there not been that desire. So the two lessons of Pesach Sheni are, there's always a second chance, but you have to want it. If you don't care, it's not going to happen. Okay, and that's a general rule in Avodas Hashem. Hashem is there when you want to be connected to Him. And He won't be there when you don't want to be connected to Him. Right? People, you can't really say to Hashem, show me a sign and then I'll follow you. It's kind of the other way around. You make the commitment and then things happen. Before the commitment, maybe, sometimes Hashem does us the tova, but you can't really depend on Hashem kind of revealing Himself to you until you show that that's truly what you want. So those are kind of very briefly, I think, one of the things we think about on this great day of Pesach Sheni. Again, there's not a lot that we do on Pesach Sheni other than not saying Tachanim, but it is a special day, and it's worthy of thinking about the lessons that Pesach Sheni teaches us. Okay, have a good Pesach Sheni.
Thank you for listening to this Samayach production. To find out more and to partner in our mission, please visit ohr.edu.